Okay, I've had more than a few people ask me to do a roundup of what I call the triple S lenses. That would be silk, sex, and sugar. What are those lenses? And trust me, I did not give it a quick thought. I gave it a long thought. And most of these I knew, but I had to reevaluate several of the lenses over and over again so that well, it wasn't a hard evaluation, but I mean, the point is that I did give it a good contemplation before actually making this video. As you can see, I've got them marked with white scraps of paper. Let me get my fat ass on the ground. Starting in no particular order would be the insanely expensive 24-70 2.8 NIKKOR. The DX lens, the 12-24 f4 NIKKOR for DX lenses, for DX cameras. Third lens would be the Tokina 100mm 2.8, as if you haven't heard enough about that. Next lens would be the 85mm f1.8 G series lens. Now, I've had or used all the 85mm. This is the sharpest and the best value for your money. While the overall body construction is not extremely tight, it is, however, even more so than the f1.4 G series NIKKOR 85mm. This is the best lens for the value in 85mm. Next lens would be the 10.5mm DX Fisheye. That's the f2.8, so it's the fisheye lens for DX. You can also use it on FX. However, do not recommend using that since there'd be an APS-C crop sensor mode for the D700 camera. Absolute top best value, incredible, would be the 35mm f1.8 G series. This is a DX lens, 35mm. Okay, very inexpensive, insanely sharp, incredibly high value. The 180mm f2.8 FX lens is the 8-element prime. It's absolutely exquisite, it's divine, it's sublime, it's absolutely everything. Next lens would be the 200mm f4. That's an older AI and AIS lens. I've talked about that endlessly. The 35mm f2. This is a D-series current production lens. I've talked about this recently. One lens I do not have here that should be on the recommendations, an FX lens, is the 35mm FX 1.8, not to be confused with the 35mm f1.8 DX lens, but the 35mm f1.8 FX lens that should be on this list but is not here. There are 24 some odd lenses more I could have brought out here, but they're all just copies of what I have here. Next lens would be the 105mm f2.5. Many of you have that. Either a pull-out lens hood or not, AI or AIS. That's the 105mm f2.5. As I've talked about recently, the exquisite, either the older one or the best one's the internal focus, is the 300mm, okay, f4.5. It's a manual focus lens. Incredibly cheap, just absolutely awesome value. It can't be touched at all. Talked about it endlessly. The 60mm f2.8. It's an FX lens, perfect for DX. It's a Swiss Army knife of NIKKOR lenses. Next lens in the series, as I'm hunching over here, would be the 70-300. Now, only in the G series, the VRG, so the 70-300 VRG. Next lens would be the best lens ever designed. It wasn't designed for the D750, but the Divine 18-35mm ED-G lens. Now only the G series on this lens. This is the 18-35. This is an FX lens. Next lens would be the 100mm 2.8. That's an older AI lens. The 100mm E series, perfectly fine. Now, the the 28-300 super zoom, or actually it's an ultra zoom, the 28-300 ultra zoom for FX. Next lens is the Sigma 150mm macro with optical stabilization. That's a $1,100 lens. That's a Sigma 150mm 2.8 with optical stabilization. Moving along over here, we have the 16mm. It's the rare bird that I told you about, the 3.5 f3.5 16mm fisheye lens, sharper than the 2.8. Although the 16mm 2.8 in AI or AIS is also a perfect choice. Over here we have the DX lens, the 18 to 200 DX Super Zoom. That's the 18 to 200. Right here we have, I'll move here in a second, the 80 to 200 D series 2.8. The older push-pull is half the price. Usually these are typically $600. The push-pull $350. This is the 80 to 200 2.8. Okay. Let me scoot my fat butt on down the line over here. And let me sit down. This is easier. Great, hooray! The 135mm f2.8, now in 3.5, also an equally valid choice. The 20mm f3.5, that's a manual focus, it's sharper than the 20mm f2.8. It's somewhat rarer, however people do avoid it, ignorantly thinking, well, I'd rather have the 2.8 20mm. No, you don't. You want the 20mm f3.5. Next lens, top value. Many considerations were made on making these lens choices. Price, value, consideration, sharpness, quality, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I actually did a detailed mental checklist before actually picking these lenses, so don't think I just made this choice willy-nilly, because I did not. We have two 50mm here. The 50mm f1.4 and the 50mm f2. Top choices both in speed and value. The f2 is insanely expensive. It's the second toughest lens Nikon ever made. You can find them very, very cheap. People avoid them thinking, oh my god, I need a really fast 50mm. Bullshit. Nonsense, okay? So the 50mm f1.4 or the 50mm f2, okay? Coming up on some of the last lenses, the Divine, the Sublime, the ever exquisite and insanely expensive, the NIKKOR 14 to 24 f2.8. It's a $2,000 lens, gray market $1,600. It's unmatched, it's unrivaled. If you ever want to blow a wad on one lens and one lens only, make it this lens. That is the NIKKOR 14 to 24 f2.8. New retail $2,000, gray market $1,600 basically. The best, fastest, cheap NIKKOR lens, the 35 to 70 f2.8. That's a D series lens. Okay, so it's a 35 to 70 2.8. And lastly, over here we have the Tamron 70 to 200 2.8 with vibration control. Now, there are only two lenses that I didn't include here and 24, 25 copies that I didn't bring out. Now, the three other lenses that should be included, one I mentioned was the 35mm 1.8. No, not the DX lens, which I've already got over here and mentioned, but the 35mm f1.8 FX lens, okay? The second lens that isn't here that should be, that's the 300mm f2.8. Now we are talking many, many thousands of dollars, but that lens qualifies for this list. Some people, money is not really a consideration. I could buy the lens, but I can't justify it. I can't justify having it. That's the 300mm f2.8. I've used the same extensively. It's incredible. Lastly, actually two more lenses. The 28mm f2.8, not the 3.5, which is a loser, but the 28mm f2.8. The last and final lens that should be on this list is the 20mm f1.8. Okay, the 20mm f1.8. So, let me get my fat butt off the ground here. And that is the Triple S lens selection. As I would call it, the Silk, Sex, and Sugar display. And I've gone down the list of all the lenses that qualify as sublime, divine, fit into several categories of exquisiteness, price, value, construction, sharpness, vignetting, chromatic aberration. I mean, I went down the list, and so I made sure that you know, this was a very logical choice. It wasn't just willy-nilly. That's a good one. That's a good. I did not do that. Okay. So, I had many requests to do this, so that's the end of that. If you like this video, you could drop me a buck or two, and then maybe I'll go out and buy some weight loss training equipment. Happy just to help, okay? Another video from the Angry Photographer, and let me know if you got any questions, but that is the FX and DX. I'm sorry if the lens you wanted to be there was not there, but I did go over all of them. They had to all reach a number of criteria, so if your lens was not listed, I'm sure it was a good lens or a very good lens, but I made this video regarding the pinnacle of exquisite lenses. Price, value, vignetting, quality, build, construction, sharpness, so on and so forth. Only these qualified to fit into that criteria. So if you're asking some of the reasoning why your lens was or was not included. So anyway, now I could have included the 135mm, which is, I don't know, it's over here somewhere. The 135mm, it's over here somewhere. The 135mm f2 DC, there it is, here it is, right over here. The 135mm f2, which is a very, very expensive lens, but I did not include it. I included the other two 135mm, the 135mm manual focus 2.8 and 135mm 3.5. So even though that lens is absolutely exquisite and divine, its price and value point, considering the fact that it is, until I started mentioning the 2.8 and the 3.5, 28, 135mm, you know, is basically 12 times as much money. So even though that lens is absolutely exquisite, I did not include it in that list because it was rated badly in my mental criteria for this list. So there's one example for the logic of why that lens, even though it's so exquisite right here, was eliminated from this list. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you liked it and you saw my fat butt crawl around on the floor of my kitchen. He's crazy. And I'll catch you later, okay? Thank you. I'm going to go drink some more coffee now and amp up my gears.